Well, everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the iPad 11th generation and compare it against the iPad 8th generation and see how both these particular iPads hold up in 2025. The iPad 11 just came out, so I definitely do think both these are very, very good options. But clearly the iPad 11 is probably the one that makes the most amount of sense here, and that's the one that I'd probably recommend a vast majority of more people to go ahead and buy. So we'll take a look at that throughout this whole entire video. First things first though, as always, if you want to pick up either one of these particular iPads, links will be down in the description below. You can get them from there, and you can help support the channel at the exact same time. Now, starting off with the outside of both these particular iPads. The iPad 8th generation came out a couple of years ago, so you have to remember it's not the latest and greatest anymore. It was an iPad that came out a couple of years ago, and on the front side of this particular iPad, you're getting a 10.2-inch Retina display. So this type of display is pretty basic when it kind of comes down to it. It's not anything super insane. It's not anything we haven't already seen before. And if you are going to go through and pick up a panel, if you're going to pick up an iPad, this panel in and of itself, it's not a terrible option. So I definitely want you to kind of think about that, because if you're going to go through and pick up some sort of an iPad, it's not a terrible display, but it is a fairly outdated panel. You're getting pretty thick bezels all throughout for the most part, a big bottom bezel and a big top bezel. You're also going through and getting a home button on the front of this display as well. So that right there can be a very outdated type of thing, because if you're trying to go through and get a good display, well, that display on the iPad 8 is not a bad display, but it's definitely going to be showing its age. So definitely keep that in mind if you're going through and looking at something like an iPad 8th generation. On the other side, the iPad 11th generation is definitely going to be a better looking iPad. So for starters, number one, this iPad is giving you a bigger size display. So it's going to be an 11-inch liquid retina display. So this one is going to be a bigger panel. It's going to be a nicer panel as well for the most part. And you're going to be getting a little bit of thinner amount of bezel on the iPad 11. So the amount of bezel all throughout the iPad 11 is significantly less. There's also no home button or anything like that on the iPad 11 either. So that does kind of give me a better impression of that particular device. It makes me feel like that particular iPad is going to be the overall better one. Now, it's not going to be perfect, but if I'm going to go through and pick up an iPad, well, definitely the iPad 11 is the one, just from that perspective alone, that would probably end up giving me an overall better experience. But another very big thing to keep in mind here too with these particular devices is that with the iPad 11, this one is also giving you a USB Type-C port at the bottom. That is a massive feature to have inside of that iPad. The iPad 8 is only giving you Lightning. Now, Lightning is alright. I'm sure if you go through and pick up a Lightning device, it's still going to be alright for the most part, but it's really not even close. If we're comparing Lightning and USB-C, USB-C is just way more everywhere, and now that all the iPhones and everything have switched over to USB-C, getting a device with Lightning might already be a little bit outdated when it comes down to it from that side. So kind of keep that in mind too. On the back side, you're getting these aluminum backs, single camera setups in the top left corner, Apple logo in the center, and that's kind of it, right? Both these support basically the same type of accessories, at least when they first came out, they had the same type of keyboards and stuff, but there's one little change to it. They both support Apple Pencil 1, but the iPad 11 generation does support Apple Pencil USB-C. So that is kind of a nice thing to basically have. If you're going through and if you're wanting to use Apple Pencil USB-C, well, you're going to basically be getting that type of capability inside of that iPad when it comes down to it from that side. So from that whole area from the exterior, that kind of covers it up there. When it comes down to the price tag though, they both are very interesting. The iPad 11 you can buy for about $349, which I personally think is a steal. I think that's a really good price to pay for an iPad like that. The iPad 8 you can probably get for around $100 and something. So that's going to be less than a third of the cost probably as the iPad 11. So that's going to be a pretty big thing to keep in mind there too. Do you want a 3-generation-old iPad? If you do, well, you're going to be able to save a third of that price. So that right there is going to be a very, very big thing to kind of think about there from that particular perspective as well. When it comes down to the cameras, both these are giving you fairly interesting type of camera layouts. They're both not the best type of cameras you can buy, but they're both not too bad either. So the iPad 8th generation on the backside is giving you a single 8 megapixel wide-angle camera. On the front side, it's giving you a 1.2 megapixel camera. On the iPad 11, This one's giving you a single 12 megapixel wide angle camera on the back and a 12 megapixel center stage camera on the front in its landscape. The camera on the iPad 11, even though it's not the best, it is significantly better than the iPad 8th generation. So for one, you're able to do 4K video on the back side of that particular iPad, whereas the iPad 8 can only do 1080p. But also that front-facing camera, which if you're on an iPad, you're probably going to use more often than the other one. This is actually a really nice type of, camera to have. It allows you, it basically follows you while you're going through and, making a video, or if you're, using your front, FaceTime or whatever, you're going to be able to utilize that type of feature set inside of that type of camera. And that is in and of itself another really cool thing to basically have. And once again, if you're going to go through and pick up an iPad, it is a really nice type of, device. It's a really nice camera to have too. So yes, it's not perfect, but it really does a good job at the camera quality. And I think that is in and of itself another really important thing to keep in mind there from that particular perspective. When it comes down to their software longevity, this is also another key takeaway for something like an iPad, like an iPad 11. This one is going to be giving you a longer lasting software support than the iPad 8th generation. Meaning, if you're going to go through and pick up an iPad, it makes a lot of sense to go and buy something like an iPad 11, because that one has the highest likelihood and highest potential of lasting for a longer period of time. So that is something that's also very important to keep in mind there as well. And when it comes down to their battery lives, it doesn't really state explicitly on their websites on which one's giving you the better battery life, but I can tell you this. If you're trying to get the iPad that is more optimized for its battery, it's going to be the iPad 11th generation. This one is just going to be one that makes a lot of sense for me to recommend to people. This one's going to be giving you just an overall better experience there. And I do think if you're going to go through and pick up an iPad, it does honestly make a lot of sense to look at something like an iPad, 11th generation as being an overall better device and being an overall better machine, in my personal opinion, than something like an iPad 8. So that's the one that makes a lot of sense for me to recommend to people too. So if I'm going to go through and pick up some sort of, iPad, definitely the iPad 11 is going to be not only a better battery life, but also better performance. That iPad is giving you the Apple A16 chip inside of it, whereas on the iPad 8, you're getting the Apple A12 chip. You're also getting more RAM inside of the A16 iPad as well. So you're definitely getting an overall better, faster experience on the iPad 11. And it's funny because technically there's a less CPU cores on the iPad 11 than the iPad 8th generation, but the neural engine, you're going from an 8-core neural engine on the iPad 8 to a 16-core neural engine on the iPad, 11th generation. So you're definitely getting, I would basically say it's like twice as fast as the iPad 8. The A16 chip is about the same thing as the iPhone 15. The iPad 8th generation's chipset is about the same thing as an iPhone XS. So you can kind of do with that information as you will. There's 6 years of development between these two. So in my personal opinion, if you're going to take a look at both these iPads, I definitely do think that the iPad 11 is by far the better iPad here in almost every single way. And I would say it's worth the money to go and upgrade from an iPad 8 to an iPad 11. The only thing I would kind of be hesitant about is that if you're able to go in the used market and pick up an iPad there, I do kind of think that a used M1 iPad Air 5 would be a better option for some people. That one, if you're able to buy it in the used market, kind of makes a little bit more sense for me to recommend to people. That might be an iPad that might be giving you a better experience here and there. But I would still say for the most part, with something like an iPad, 8th generation, it was a good iPad. It was a legendary iPad when it first came out. I just don't think it's necessarily worth buying anymore. And there's far better options for you to go and buy rather than that iPad. So from that in and of itself, that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that'll mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.